Welcome to the Red Clinic Podcast. I'm Dr. Schwalen, licensed psychologist and expert in the treatment of eating disorders. Today I have a very special guest, Joseph Lopez, one of our therapists in the Recovered Clinic, joining us today because we're going to talk about his personal story of recovery and then also pick his brain about his expertise as a therapist who treats clients with eating disorders. Hi, Joseph. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm glad you're here. I'm super excited that you're here.
Thank you.
So if you don't mind, I know I did a little bit of an introduction, but if you don't mind just introducing yourself, give us a little bit of your background in terms of you as a therapist and what your favorite type of work to do is, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, great. So my name is Joseph Lopez. I am a licensed master level social worker. I'm getting ready to sit for my clinical social work license, but I graduated from Abilene Christian University with a master's degree in social work. And I was taught regarding eating disorders at Shades of Hope in Buffalo Gap by Tenny McCarty. She's written an eating disorder book and very expert in the field of eating disorders. And that's my passion, is working with eating disorders on the whole spectrum.
All right. And you say the whole spectrum. We talk about that whole spectrum here all the time on this show. And so it's all different kinds of eating disorders and disordered eating, and even those affected just by diet culture in general. But I wanted to start, if you're all right with it, talking about your own personal story.
Okay, great. So, yes. So when I was growing up, my earliest memories are, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. And so all my older siblings would go to school, and me and my mom would sit at home and we'd watch The Young and the Restless. But before The Young and the Restless started, we would actually watch aerobics, and we would sit and we would do aerobics, and I would mimic the movements that were being shown on TV and with her. And at that time, I remember her also being on a different diet every week. My older brothers were into fitness and bodybuilding. They were very active athletes. They were 10 years older than me. So we had every issue of Muscle and Fitness magazines in our home. And so it was very important. My siblings, my parents, they were always talking about fitness, diet, and look. So it was something that was very ingrained in me from a very young age.
It was part of your family culture. Yeah. I mean, it was family values on appearance and weight and dieting and appearance, like you're saying, and like I just said twice. So, yes. Okay.
Absolutely. So, and I also did not eat very much at a very young age. My dad used to make the joke when we'd go to restaurants and he'd tell the waitress that Joseph's stomach is about that big, and so I really didn't like to eat. I was always obsessed with the way I looked in the mirror. My parents would eat their meals, and then they'd give me kind of what was left over, or they'd bring a little plate and I would eat. I had a brother that was a year older than me, and I remember he could eat a whole Sonic hamburger when we were like 7 or 8, and I could eat like a quarter of it, and I was completely full. That's about as much as I wanted to eat. But when I was about 8 or 9, we went to a garage sale, and they had a weight bench, and I really wanted it, and I got an allowance, so I was able to buy this weight bench, so I started lifting weights at a pretty young age. My older brothers had weights and weight benches, in our home. So I wanted my own, though, and it was very, very important to me.
You wanted to be like your brothers. I mean, that's what they were modeling. Your mom and dad probably supported that, from what you're saying. And what you just said, though, I'm going to interrupt you here and there. I hope you're okay with that.
It's okay.
But
yeah.
What you just said is, Dad would go and tell the servers at restaurants that, Joseph's stomach is this big. Mm-hmm. So even though you were a kid who maybe didn't eat as much, mm-hmm. by saying that and publicly introducing you to people that way, it was mm-hmm. almost as if now mm-hmm. that's the expectation also. Mm-hmm. So I wonder for you at age 6, 7 years old, like your little psyche, right? Like having to deal with that of this is just what is expected of me now. So if I ever go away from that description of my stomach, right? Mm-hmm. Then I may end up disappointing people or shocking people, and mm-hmm. I got to kind of fit into this little box that's being made for me. Mm-hmm. Did you ever experience any of those thoughts? Or
absolutely. So, it was funny because right before I got into eating disorder recovery, I ran a ultra marathon. An ultra marathon is anything over a marathon level pace. and I was not prepared for it. I was used to running on pavement, and this was at a state park with rocks and sand and dirt. And I remember, I guess at mile 22, I wanted to quit, and this thing was 30 miles. And the thing I remember was that, I don't want to disappoint my dad. It wasn't anybody else. It wasn't anything. It was, I'm going to have to go up to my dad after this race, and he's going to ask me about it, and I'm going to have to tell him I quit. And I was like, nope, that's not going to happen. And I walked the last 8 miles of that race.
Anything so that you would not have to tell your dad that you quit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was like a huge motivating factor for maybe why you did what you did and why you didn't do the things you didn't do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've always told people that everything that I've ever done was to impress my parents.
Okay.
To get their approval. And my master's degree, the fitness competitions that I've been in, the triathlons, all these things were to try to get my parents to notice me.
Just to be good enough, right? And when I'm training new hires in orientation, and I'm talking to therapists and parents, even when I'm doing parent sessions, I will always bring people back to the fact that children, it's like this innate thing inside of all of us as human beings. We just want our parents' approval. It's so important to our psyches and our emotional functioning and our sense of who we are in this world. And, most of the parents that I work with can resonate with that because they see it in their own children that, pretty much when I give them feedback or I do spend time with them or give them some sense that I approve of them, I can tell them that my child just does better in general. And then I can say to them usually if you think about it, there's a lot of adults to this day who are still trying to get their parents' approval because that's how innately motivated by approval from our parents we are as human beings.
Absolutely.
A very huge part of our psychological and emotional well-being.
Absolutely. It's a big part, and it wasn't until... It took a long time to realize that, even in recovery with my eating disorder, and how much, I thought, how is this going to affect my mom and dad, or how is it going to look to them, and one day I finally just said, you know what, it's their dream and it's not my dream anymore, and I had to be like, this, what's going to make me happy,
right?
Yeah, and set that boundary.
Right, you had to figure out who you were apart from them.
Yeah,
like where they end and you begin, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so those are some huge realizations.
Those are.
That's what someone, I guess, comes to when they're in recovery. So tell us more. What's the rest of your story?
Okay, so, junior high comes and I start drinking a little bit. And so, I'm still trying to navigate junior high, right? My older siblings were, one was the smartest kid in his grade and the other one was good at every sport, and here comes little Joseph. And he's not either one of those things. And so, I didn't realize that my siblings put a lot more work into what they did to get where they were at. My brother, the athlete, as we call him in the family, I thought it came natural to him, and it didn't. He put in a lot of work, and I wasn't willing to put in as much work at that time. I thought I was going to be naturally fit like him, and I wasn't that great at sports, but I wanted it so bad, and the more I wanted it, the more I worked out, and the more I didn't get played, because of other reasons. There's reasons of who you are in where I grew up at. You're not going to play these sports if you're not a certain person in the community. Your parents aren't these certain people. So, but that love of fitness always kept me going back. I kept going back. I played sports all through junior high and high school. When I got out of college, most people gained the freshman 15. I gained 15 pounds of muscle my freshman year because I could go to school. I could go home and eat, take a little nap, and then go hit the weight room, and it was free. I got access to the best weight room at college, so the way I looked was always very, very important. I would kind of fluctuate between being very muscular and being very thin, kind of restricting muscular and thin, and people would ask me, hey, can you tell me what to eat? Can you tell me how to work out? And I got all this, people would notice me. And that it felt good, but on the inside, I hated myself. I really did. I saw workout and fitness and eating as a punishment, and it was always on my mind.
And what you just shared is so common with the clients that we work with in the Recovered Clinic. clients who are processing in therapy about, it didn't matter how good I looked on the outside. I still felt really bad on the inside.
Yeah.
And, you shared you were able to connect the dots that a lot of what you did was always to try to impress dad, right? And you never really felt like you were ever good enough. You're describing how you lived in the shadow of your two older brothers. And so that was kind of this core belief that you held, is that no matter what, even if you were getting all this feedback from other people about them wanting to model after you because you were this physically fit person who seemed to have it all together, that still didn't convince you that you were good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. It didn't, no matter how much I did, because it was never going to be good enough because I didn't love myself. I hated myself. I was at war.
So I want you to say that again, but get a little closer to the microphone because that was really important. And I want to make sure that people don't miss that. So
Which part?
The part of why it was never good enough.
It was never good enough because I didn't love myself.
Yeah.
At all. I didn't. I hated myself with a passion. At my very core. I when you're in your eating disorder and addiction, I did a lot of things that I was not proud of. I missed a lot of things because I would rather be working out, or I just didn't have the energy. I would go, if I was binging, I'd go get fast food, and then I'd go back and say, oh, by the way, you forgot to put these items, and they'd be like, oh, we're sorry, and they'd give me these free items so I could binge even more. And so I was just not proud of the things I was doing, and you can't love yourself when you're doing things you're not proud of.
Right. And it seems like, the reason I made you repeat it, right, is because it's so key is ultimately when it comes down to it, when you're really ready to do the work, you're in a place where you have to look at the relationship you have with yourself.
Absolutely.
Right? Why you're doing things and what are the real motives behind why you're doing what you're doing.
Absolutely.
I remember there was a supervisor that I used to work under when I was in training who had told me, she was helping me just with one of the clients that I was working with. I was going back to her and, just like we do when we're in supervision, sharing about what was happening in session and trying to get some more feedback about like kind of where to go next. And I had told her that the client was sharing with me that all she wanted to do was prove to everyone else that she really could like ace the test. I mean, it was so important to her that she could show her friends and her family that she had what it took to ace this test. And my supervisor said, well, I think it's obvious where you go next in session, because is it really that important that she proves it to herself, or do we really want her to get to the point, proves it to others, or do we want her to get to the point where she can the only person she needs to prove it to is herself? And for me as a young budding therapist, right, psychologist, that was so huge for me even. It was like, oh yeah, we have to like really get our clients to understand that this isn't about everybody else and the appearances and what you look like on the outside, but it's truly about finding the motivation to do these things for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a great story with that. Most people would call it my spiritual experience in recovery. When I ended up going back to my master's program, I had to write my thesis and I needed to take this class. And I was in my first year of eating disorder recovery, and come to find out I didn't need this class. But I told my sponsor, I am taking this class. And he goes, well, why do you need to take the class? And I said, well, I got to prove that I'm smarter than these kids. I got to prove that I took more classes, that I held a job and went to an internship. And he goes, okay. He goes, I want you to do me a favor. He goes, I want you to go to 3 people in recovery and ask them if they would take the class. Tell them exactly what you told me. So I went up to the first guy. His name was Mike. And I said, hey, Mike. And he goes, great, take the class. I think you should totally do it because that's really important. You're going to go to recovery less. You're going to go to meetings less. And I said, okay, I get what you're saying. And so I went up to the next person and they said, why would you take the class? How much does a class cost? I said, $3,000. They were like, do you have $3,000? And I was like, no, of course not. And they were like, but you're still going to graduate. You can go to meetings more. You can stay in recovery. You can do all these things. And I said, yeah. And they said, don't take the class. Why would you take that? So I went up to the third person and they said the same thing, So I went to the School of Social Work that day, and I said, I'm taking this class. And at the very last moment, I decided not to take the class. And I said to my professor, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to take the class. He goes, great, finish your thesis, and we'll see you in May for graduation. And I walked out because I thought he was going to say, well, you got to take this class. Why are you not taking it? It was no big deal. And when I walked out of that building, and I want to say it was during the winter in Abilene, Texas. It should have been cold and dreary and cloudy, but it wasn't. The sun was shining and the birds were singing. And it was the first time I realized how much harder I had made life on myself. It was the first time I realized that I had been trying to swim upstream against all the fish, that I could make life as easy as I wanted to. But I had made my life really hard for a long time to prove a lot of things to other people.
Yeah, that's powerful, because we've only known you at NextSTEPS for a little while now, but I think everyone that's interacted with you would describe you as he's so chill, so go with the flow. He kind of finds a way to just be flexible and take it as it comes. That kind of guy, right?
That was not me.
Wow.
For a long time.
It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, it is, because I was always trying to put that square peg in the round hole. I was trying to make things happen. And I realized, when I put, my faith in a higher power, in God, or whatever you want to call that person, that things worked out the way they were supposed to. The more I took the control out of my life, the more things happened the way they were meant to happen.
The more you surrendered, right? The more you relinquished that control. And
absolutely.
That's really, really powerful. But there are more steps that you took to get there, right? So you jumped to your master's program, but I think you skipped a few steps in there. So let's tell your story so people can connect those dots.
Yeah. So in between college, my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, I just, that time was just spent a lot on fitness. And I was going from job to job. My bachelor's degree was in sociology, which really can't get you a professional job.
Don't tell my sister that.
Yes, absolutely. Nobody told me that. And so, I was, the only comfort and peace that I could find was in my eating disorder. Working out and being fit and having that structure, because the jobs I was going through, I was burning through money. I was living with my parents. I'd go out for a little bit and live on my own, and then I'd come back and live with my parents, and then I'd go out and live on my own. And the only place to go hide out from life is college. So I thought, hey, that's a good place to go to college. People don't care that you're not, making anything of yourself. You're just kind of, you're working towards something, but you don't have to be anything right now. And so I thought, hey, I don't want to face life. I don't want to grow up anymore, or I don't want to grow up. So let me go hide out.
It was a great escape for you.
Yeah.
I want you to elaborate a little bit, because, I know the listeners out there, they're not just people who are struggling currently with eating disorders, but it's family members, support people affected by someone who has an eating disorder. So what you said about you found comfort in your eating disorder, it was like a way for you to just deal by going and working out, or going and restricting, I think is what you said, right?
Yes.
Can you say more about that? I mean, because a lot of people, if they don't have an eating disorder, will say the same thing.
Yes.
I get comfort in going to work out. It's a stress relief, right? So I guess what I'm getting at is when is it a true problem? Like why was it different, right, for you versus just the person who's going to work out to blow off some steam?
Sure, absolutely. So when I became powerless and unmanageable over it, when it was telling me, working out became like an OCD. Like if I skipped any part of it, I felt bad. I was thinking about it a lot. I, at one point, had 3 gym memberships. I couldn't afford to pay my rent, but here I am having 3 gym memberships. You can only be at one gym at one time.
Right.
But that comfort, my life is out of control, right? So but I can control what I eat. I can control how I look. I can control what gyms I'm going to. I can control the amount of sets and reps that I do. And there's a lot of comfort, because my eating disorder has never told me no. It's always been there for me. If I have a bad day and I restrict, I feel good. My eating disorder tells me, you know what? You don't deserve to eat. You don't deserve these things. And that felt good. And that sounds very, very sick, but it's that, to me, it's that compulsion I know that what I'm doing is not right, but I don't know how to stop it.
Okay.
And I don't know that I did want to stop it at that time.
Right.
But I knew it was not right.
Okay, so now what I'm going to do is going to sound really, really judgy,
Sure.
but this is what we hear from
Mm-hmm.
families. I mean, they're out there struggling with this and they don't know how to respond. So I'm going to do what we've heard from our families, okay? So, you were a kid who grew up in the country. Sounds like you had you had a nice family, right? You were in college, so you had the privilege of getting educated. Why was your life so out of control? What were you actually, what was actually happening that you felt like nothing was good, right?
Yeah.
We hear that all the time,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
How can they have problems or,
yeah.
right? Because they have such a good life. They're growing up so well. So how do you help people listening understand that?
Yeah. So, I tell people, one of the biggest things that I tell my clients and I tell parents is don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. They may look like everything's great and chill and, on the outside, but on the inside, what's really going on? We don't know what that third grade teacher treated their kid like. We don't know the bullying, especially now with cyberbullying. We don't know, they go to camp, something happens. I'm not getting the positive feedback from my parents that I need, right? And I'm wondering when I see all these kids and their mom's like, I love you, you're great, you're proud of you. And then, my mom's like, you didn't do enough. Could you have done better? And it's kind of like, I'm at this internal war with myself because people do see. And it goes back to eating disorders are all about secrets and hiding things. So there's a lot of secrets that people with eating disorders are hiding. And people on the outside just do not see that.
Right. And people with the eating disorders, like you said, it looks like you have it all together. I mean, people were coming to you asking you for fitness and health advice, and they had no clue what kind of turmoil you really had on the inside.
Yeah, it looked like I had a brand new pickup, and I was working out, and the thing is, my bank account's negative $35, and all these gym memberships are trying to come out, and I don't know what to do with my life, and what direction do I go in, and all my classmates are getting married, and getting married and graduating by the time they're 22 and going off to their master's program. And it's like, I don't even know what I want to do yet, so there's all this pressure and I'm at that point where I'm comparing my insides to everybody's outsides because everybody else looks like they've got their stuff together.
Right. And comparison is such a huge part of eating disorders, right?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Let me, I don't want to look at me, so I'm going to look at you.
Right.
And I don't like me, so I'm going to try to be you, but I only see the outside of what you look like.
And then I'm going to use what I see to then turn against myself, right? Yeah. Pick apart everything that I'm not because I'm comparing myself to what I think you are.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So what else do you want to tell us about your story?
So, I actually stopped drinking, and then I lost like 37 pounds in like 30 days. So at that point I'm in alcohol recovery, so I'm a year in alcohol recovery when I go to treatment for my eating disorder.
Well, let me just pause you right there. So 37 days or 37 pounds in 30 days, y'all, is not safe, right? It's very alarming. And, if I'm doing an assessment and someone shares that with me and one of my dietitians, we're going to be very, very concerned about that. It's not something to be proud of or give them a high five on or anything like that. For y'all listening, that much weight loss, that rapid of a weight loss can be very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, I would get up and I'd get dizzy and, my parents were like, what's going on? You look very different than you did not even a month ago. And I was just like, whatever, it's fitness. I'm just, being healthy and stuff like that. But the thing, I was going to say the lucky part, but it wasn't even lucky. I was going back to college at that time. So it was like my parents saw me for a little bit. I remember they bought me some Ensures.
Okay.
I said, drink these.
So they were concerned enough to go out and buy you supplement.
Yeah.
Because they wanted you to gain that weight back that they saw you drop so rapidly.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I want to spend a little bit of time on, even just for a minute, but you said you stopped drinking. So it sounds like you stopped with one thing and then the other thing ramped up. So you stopped drinking and then the eating disorder kind of ramps up.
Yeah, we call that cross addiction.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so, I always say addiction, the roots look the same, but the branches are going to look different. Some people may use eating disorders, some people may use alcohol, some people may use drugs.
Okay.
Right. So when I didn't have my coping mechanism of alcohol, I did not like the thoughts that were going through my head. And
Okay.
so the only way to quiet those thoughts was to start restricting again
Okay.
and start exercising.
So you replace one unhealthy coping skill with another set of unhealthy coping skills.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. That's why I tell you, what are you going to pick up next? I tell my clients, you may get healthy in your eating disorder, but be very careful of, the cigarettes, the tobacco, the drinking, the dating apps, there's a lot of things that I can use to take my mind off of what's really going on. And I think that's why it's so important to get to the roots of the cause of your eating disorder.
So the roots are the same, but the branches may take different directions.
Yeah.
Got it. So
Absolutely.
cross addiction, or that's what you called it, right?
Cross addiction.
Yeah.
That's the way I was taught. I don't.
Okay.
There may be a different name for it, but
I
that's
just
what we
want to
call it.
reflect it back because
Yeah.
we're using the same language right now.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. What else do you want to tell us about your story?
So, so I'm in recovery, and I have a friend that's in eating disorder recovery, right? Because I'm in Abilene, and they had 12-step meetings for anorexics and bulimics anonymous at Shades of Hope in Buffalo Gap. And my friend I had met some people that were in recovery, and we'd go to meetings and stuff. And they said, "Have you ever thought about going to treatment?" And I said, "It's private. I can't afford it." And so she gave me this little box. And a big part of 12-step recovery is having a power greater than yourself, a higher power of God. And 12 steps is very open. You call it whatever you want. So she goes, "I made you this little God box, and I want you to put whatever you would pray about or think about into it." So I put different things into it. And I remember I put, if this is meant for eating disorder treatment, then it's meant to be. And if it's not, it'll work out the way it's supposed to. So I put that in the box. Well, the treatment center calls me later on and says, "Hey, we'd love to give you treatment on a scholarship if you'll be on this episode of Nightline."
Oh.
Right. So I ended up going to treatment on scholarship, and that's where my recovery really, really took off.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a God story.
Yeah, it was.
Totally.
Yeah.
He found you, right? He just come on, I'm going to take care of you now.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really cool. You're also a male, right? Affected by an eating disorder. Mm-hmm. So do you know any of the statistics about males affected by eating disorders?
I try not to. I look them up every once in a while, but what I say is eating disorders are eating disorders.
Yep.
Regardless if they're male, female, transgendered,
right? They don't discriminate, right?
Yeah, they don't. And what's important is that, are you getting the help that you need for what you're dealing with?
Okay.
Yeah, but now, does that stigma still exist? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so, I bring it up because it's that stigma, but it's also, there's so much of a myth out there that eating disorders don't really affect men, right? Mm-hmm. But, I mean, you're a male affected by eating disorder, you're in recovery, and I just wanted to really point that out because I think our listeners out there too sometimes may have a hard time wrapping their head around that.
Yeah.
Eating disorders don't discriminate, and I say that on this show all the time, and so I really wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and there's that stereotype because guys are supposed to drink beer and eat food, and what they look like is not very important.
Right.
And I'm like, why is there so many fitness magazines out there?
Yeah.
And guys are not immune to that either, to looking at other, or looking at social media and saying, "Man, I wish I had that six pack," or "That dude's very fit."
Right. What you describe even is it doesn't necessarily even start with going out to the grocery store and seeing the magazine. It could be the message that you're getting in your own home as a very little kid.
Absolutely.
What you describe is this whole, I'm sure there's many themes that you found in your story in the past, but one that's really standing out today is the whole theme of comparison. I mean, it started very early on for you, and you had your brothers kind of there to do the comparison to, and then you went off to college and you're comparing other kids your age and all the things they're accomplishing, and you being kind of trapped in this idea of, I can't live up to any of this, right? So comparison's that theme that I'm picking up today, but I'm sure there's other themes you've picked up on too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the comparison. It's like not feeling that I'm ever good enough. It's the lack of confidence, There's a lot of things in there. There's in AA we call them character defects. perfectionism, ego, pride, pretty much the 7 deadly sins, right?
Right.
It's like, am I, all those things in balance are great, right? But, when you have an eating disorder, there's no balance.
Right.
It's all or nothing. It's that black or white
Exactly.
thinking.
Black and white, very concrete. So now that you are in recovery, how do you use those character, what are they?
Character defects, right?
Defects.
Yeah.
How do you use the character defects? How have you turned those into something that actually works for you?
Yeah. And so, I always use perfectionism, right? In balance is great, right? Because you expect me to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yes,
And you expect me to take a 30-minute lunch or an hour, or, I got to be perfect. I got to brush my teeth every day
Got it.
and take a shower. Yeah, I got to be perfect in those things, right? Now, am I using perfectionism to fill this hole in my heart? Or am I using it to run away from things? And that's what I tell the clients, we're never going to be perfect. We're perfectly imperfect, right? And we're never going to achieve this perfectionistic status. But what I'm hearing you say when they talk about perfectionism is there's something else going on that you're really using this to run away from something else, right? Those core issues, right?
Right. So it's like a distraction from what really matters,
Yeah.
right? So if I can just get this one thing right and focus all my energy here, then I don't have any energy left to deal with the stuff that's really bothering me,
Yeah.
the stuff below the surface.
Absolutely. And it's the same thing with pride. I got to have a little pride, to brush my hair or, comb my hair, wash or brush my teeth, take a bath, those things. But when I'm so full of pride that I'm comparing myself, I'm thinner than you, you want to look like me. I'm so much better than you because everybody wants to be fit and I've achieved that. And it's like, no.
Or I'm so full of pride, I can't get myself to show weakness. I can't be vulnerable. I can't look like I don't have it all together.
Exactly. And I was talking to a client about this the other day because I said, it was kind of a trick question. And I said, tell me about what your positive and negative emotions are. And of course, she goes, anger, sadness. And I said, it's actually a trick question. I said, emotions are neither negative nor positive. They're just emotions.
Right.
I said, but when you label them that way, you are going to bottle them up and you're not going to express them appropriately. And so I think it's very important to express those emotions appropriately, and they're not good or bad. They're just emotions.
And so you're in recovery, but you're definitely not perfect at all those things either.
No, not at all.
So for those listening, about recovery and what they can expect once their loved one gets there, they're not going to be perfect at recovery, right? So what's realistic? What can someone expect?
Yeah. So relapse is a big part. It's even a part of my story, my eating disorder. one day I got my student loan payment. And, I'm in early recovery. I don't have much money. And I remember I went and ran I think it was 7 miles, right? I came home and I talked to some friends and they said, what's really going on? And I said, I got the student loan payment. I don't want to pay it. How am I going to pay off all these student loans? And they said, how do you eat an elephant? And I said, I don't know, with a fork and a knife. And they say, no, you eat it one bite at a time. And that's the way your recovery has to be, right? One day at a time. And
That
they were
is
like,
so funny. I have to throw this out there. So when I was in my PhD program, there were times when I was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. I want to drop out. I'd want to give up. This is so hard and pointless. Some of it felt to me. And I hated some of it sometimes. And so I would call my mom and she would say, imagine that you're squeezing an elephant through your hand. And the only way you can squeeze that entire thing, right, is one part at a time. So there'd be times when I'd hit a milestone in the program. She's like, there's the body of the elephant. And now all you have left when it was time to defend dissertation was it's the tail. You're on the tail. You've almost got that thing squeezed through your hand. So you saying that, man, that just took me right back to that little pep talk I got to get through grad school.
Absolutely, yeah. And relapse doesn't mean that you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you don't deserve recovery. I was taught early in recovery, the people that taught me, Tindy McCarty, that owned Shades of Hope, she would always say, you can start your day over as many times as it takes. And the worst thing I can do is say tomorrow, because that just gives me a reason to do whatever I want today. But if I say I went and ran 7 miles, but guess what? I am going to eat my snack, I'm going to eat my dinner, and I'm not going to work out until I'm allowed to work out. per the staff. And I can do that. And there was days where I had to start my day over lots of times, but the thing was, I started building that relationship with myself. I started loving myself more, and I did not, the things that I didn't, that I wasn't proud of were like, they was just part of my story, and I could give myself grace, and I could, I didn't have to shame myself over every little thing. And that was a big part that I had been so used to beating myself up.
Right. And I can tell you're there because, I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't give you any heads up. I said, hey, you're going to come on the podcast. I want you to share your story. You're like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no shame.
Yeah, no, not
It's
at all.
amazing.
Yeah, and it's my passion today. So I know what it feels like to be alone and not know where to turn and to show up to an AA meeting or a 12-step Anorexics and Bulimics Anonymous meeting, and you don't know what you're doing there. You're scared. You're like, is this what my life has come to? So, I believe that I was given this gift of recovery and this education and all this experience to help other people. So anytime I need to tell my story or people need assistance or help in anything regarding eating disorders, I'm like, that's what I'm here for.
That's amazing. Yeah. And, what you just said is anytime I need to tell my story, like anytime I think people need to hear it, you're going to share it, which is amazing that you even see that or know. People need to hear stories, other people's stories. I mean, that's what encourages us and keeps us motivated and makes it okay to talk about these things. Otherwise, it's going to be a stigma forever, and people are just going to be so alone with it.
Absolutely. And, on social media, a lot of my friends, I see them now and they have kids and they have jobs and they graduated from college and they're doing all these things. We showed up as a bunch of emotionally stunted kids in eating disorder treatment, and over time, there are the success stories.
So one thing you said was in treatment, you were told that you can start your day over at any time, right? You don't, by saying I'll do it tomorrow, it's actually like a disservice to yourself, right? Yeah. And I love that you just said that and that you've been told that, because one thing I think is very important for families and loved ones and those in eating disorder recovery to understand is that recovery, everything you learn in recovery, I think, will rip that rug out from underneath you. So everything you thought you knew, right, is actually, it needs to be relearned.
Absolutely.
Because it's so common for people to really think, oh, I messed up today, so it's a big fail. Let me just screw the day off, and hopefully tomorrow will be better. It doesn't need to be today and tomorrow. That's so black and white thinking. Yeah. It can still be, well, we still have all this time left in today. Why don't we try again right now?
Yeah,
absolutely. Right? So I love that, because that is just one example of how really when you're truly, working towards recovery, everything you thought you knew, you just have to relearn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all a learning experience, walking through life, as we call it, life on life's terms. Life is going to happen. It's going to throw curveballs, and how am I going to handle this? And the thing is, when I got into recovery, you learn all these acronyms. And one of the biggest ones was fear. And it could stand for forget everything and run, which was my MO growing up. Or I could face everything and recovery.
Okay.
Or face everything and recover.
Right.
And that's the thing, when there's things that I don't want to walk through, it's like, you know what, this is not going to hurt me. I have the tools. I have a God. I have a recovery, people in recovery. I get lucky. I work at NextSTEPS. So I have a lot of therapists and doctors that I work with that can help me navigate. I may not know how to navigate this, but somebody does. And it's just not, it's about not keeping that secret. Saying, hey, I'm struggling with this. How do I walk through this? Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine on the podcast. It's cool. Yeah.
I told you that, right?
yeah, absolutely. And you're like, you're right. It's just like telling my story. I've done it lots of times. So.
Yeah, it's just having a conversation about something you know a lot about.
Yeah, absolutely. But in my mind, I can turn a pebble into Mount St. Everest, and it's really a pebble at the end of the day, but I need other people to tell me recovery is about being with other people. I say this, God made us to help each other, to be of service to each other. And the only way I've ever known God work is through people. You know, I've never seen a burning bush or a booming voice in the sky, but I have gone up to other people with lots of time in recovery and said, hey, how do I get through this? And they usually say, did you pray about it? And I'm like, no. And they're like, start there. And that's one of the tools of recovery, right? Whatever prayer looks like to you, you know? And then it's like, hey, do it this way or do this. Or, you know, a lot of times, you know, recovery to me is, it's not what I should do, but it's like what I don't need to do, right? That's where I need to start, right? I've got something big ahead of me. What I know not to do is restrict, to take control, to go exercise. It's to not start there, right? And I've got a chance when I look at those things, right?
So that brings my next question to you, because there's a lot of families out there that, because we're talking about don't expect perfection in recovery either.
Yeah.
So you got something big in front of you, and the urges may be to restrict and take control and fall back on those comfortable things, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I have two questions. What really helped you the most in the beginning when you were trying to overcome those go-to urges and choose a different path, right?
So one of the big things, and it's part of my recovery story. So when I was going to 12-step meetings, I met a girl named Ashley. And me and Ashley were very unhealthy friends. We would restrict together. We'd go exercise together. And when we got to treatment, I saw how much she struggled. And that was the first time I realized how much my addiction could affect and hurt other people. I made amends to Ashley that day, and I said I was never going to enable anybody in their eating disorder ever again, ever. And so my big part of my recovery was seeing that for the first time with clear eyes, and how much my eating disorder had effect on me and had effect on other people. So a big part of my recovery was really looking at myself, because I was always looking at other people. What do they look like? Compare myself to do all these things, and it's like, what's going on inside of me? So a big part of my recovery was taking responsibility for my actions. Yeah, I can go get 3 gym memberships, but I don't want to ask my parents for money anymore. When you're completely sober from all the things, you're feeling a lot of things for the first time, and it's okay. You can walk through those things, and to know that it's going to be okay and that I'm not going to do it perfectly.
So you're telling people that they have to feel their feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, scary, right?
I think we could just like drop the mic right there.
Yeah, boom.
Right?
Yeah.
That's intense. I mean, that's where all the work happens, right?
Yeah.
So now you're faced with all these feelings, and you have to figure out a way to cope in a way that's not going to hurt you or others.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I had to learn, that feelings, feelings are not facts. Just because I'm feeling something doesn't mean it's true. My go-to feeling may be anger. If I get angry at somebody, to me, fear is always the grandparent of all other feelings. If I'm angry or something, it's because I'm afraid that I'm going to look vulnerable, that I'm not going to have it all together, or people are going to see me differently. At the end of the day, who cares?
Right.
It's okay to be afraid. It goes back to that balance. I need to have a little fear, or I would try to pick up a snake or something, right? I need to have a fear of an eating disorder because it will hurt me.
Right.
I need to have a fear of missing a therapy appointment, right? Because that could have some consequences of I can't talk about what I'm dealing with, But if I'm afraid to the extreme of gaining weight, or I hate this part of my body, or what are people going to think of me, that fear has gotten way out of balance.
Okay. So fear, just like perfectionism, just like everything else that people may struggle with, can also be something that can help us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what, treatment helps us, all people, really get to that point of understanding how to channel those things in a useful way.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, even to this day, I have a healthy fear of my eating disorder because it will hurt me. I have a healthy fear of going back to it, but I know that I have the tools. And today I want to fight harder than my eating disorder today.
Right.
One day at a time.
Right. One day at a time. Okay. So my next question, and probably my last question before we kind of move into the next phase of this, for families out there listening, when does a person get to the point where It's no longer their go-to. Like they've gotten further and further away from those eating disorder behaviors or the patterns, and they're more likely to choose a healthy coping skill than revert back to an unhealthy coping skill.
You know, when I got far enough away from my eating disorder, I could see the pros and cons, right? I could see that, you know what, living on my own is not a bad thing. Having my own money actually is pretty dang good. Not being codependent, actually looking at red flags when making friends and forming new relationships. When my recovery got to the point where I was coping with things healthily, I don't think I could even restrict even if I tried today, because I'm not struggling with anything. There's nothing I'm running away from.
Okay.
You know? So
does that mean you like food too?
I do like food.
All right.
Yeah,
I think a lot of our listeners are wondering about that.
Yeah,
You know, will
absolutely.
my kid ever get to the point where they want to enjoy a meal, or they actually look forward to their next meal, right?
And today, you know, food is fuel. It's not therapy. Food was therapy for many, many years. And today, you know, I always say, you don't go to the different gas stations and think, oh, I want Shell today because that'll make my car really happy. Or, you know, you don't go to the Murphy's at the Walmart and, you know, no, you just put in gas, right? It's fuel, right? It has its place. The same thing with food. Food it's fuel today.
Yeah.
It has its purpose, and it's not the thing that I need to walk through life.
Right. It's functional. It's not necessarily an emotional outlet or a way to have control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else about your story that we didn't get to talk about yet that you really want to make sure you tell our audience?
No, I don't think so. I'll probably think of it on the way home.
Okay. And be like, oh, I could have done that one.